Praise the Lord and welcome to Sunday Morning Christian Education. My name is Teraie Deloach. I attend Greater Bethlehem Temple Apostolic Church located on 4781 Hamilton Avenue in Cincinnati, Ohio, where Bishop James Chapman is the pastor. Today's lesson is titled Obedience and Rest. The lesson text comes from the book of Exodus, chapter 31, verses 12 through 18. The golden text reads, Verily, my Sabbath ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doeth sanctify you. And that's from Exodus chapter 31, verses 13. The lesson says, in addition to the sign of circumcision, by which the Hebrews were known, God gave his people the sign of the Sabbath. They were to set one day aside each week for the express purpose of meeting with God. He had blessed them. By meeting together weekly, they would be reminded as an entire nation of that blessing. Even though today we meet with God anytime and anywhere, the Sabbath compares to our Sundays, where we come together in fellowship and should be focused and worshiping God. It is considered the Lord's Day, but to me, every day is the Lord's Day. The Sabbath day was given to Moses straight from God and commanded to be observed. It had been given as a part of the Ten Commandments, but its importance was emphasized to Moses in this specific message from God. Keeping the Sabbath was not simply a matter of their choosing. It was a command that God said they must follow. The importance of the Sabbath was shown when God gave it to the people as a sign. He wanted them to be reminded every week of the covenant he had made with them as a people. Other nations had holy days where they honored their false gods, but God wanted his people to be reminded of his presence and blessings once every 7 days. He was very specific in what he wanted them to remember. The Sabbath was to remind them, I am the Lord that doeth sanctify you. They were to work 6 days out of the week, but were to rest on the seventh. Instead of going to work in the fields, they were to approach God and worship. This was so important to God that he ordained capital punishment for those who refused to follow his will and desecrated the Sabbath. The legal authorities were to cut off those who ignored the command of God and worked on the Sabbath day. God did not take pleasure in the punishment. He just wanted them to enjoy the blessings of fellowship with him, which would make the punishment unnecessary. God knew that one of the best ways to keep his people aware of his presence and close to him, to his will, would be a regular time of worship, which happened weekly. Otherwise, they would drift away from him. A regular time of worship was key to their spiritual growth. The people's willingness to keep the Sabbath was a sign of God's work in their hearts. It showed the evidence of having a relationship with him. The Spirit had caused them to be obedient to God, and that showed that God has done his work in them. It was a sign that they loved him and wanted to please him with their worship and obedience. The purpose of the Sabbath day physically shows that they needed the day of rest after a hard week of work. I know after a hard week of work, I'm ready for the weekend. God knows what's best for our body. Without the proper rest, it could affect our bodies terribly. You could be cranky and moody and not function right. So this was a time to refresh, refuel, and heal the body. The purpose of the Sabbath day spiritually shown the importance of dedicating one's day and 7 as holy to the Lord. It was like a tithe of their time. The dedicated holy worship of God and learning about Him and renewing their determination to allow Him to rule and reign in all their doings. Tuning in and focusing on God. It was a picture or a sign of the constant fellowship and relationship He had planned for His people. God expected His people to grow spiritually and become like Him. God is a holy God and loving and gracious. He wanted them to be holy, loving, and gracious as well. The purpose of the Sabbath day, personally, it reminded them of the vital nature of regular communion with God. He was the source of life and strength, and to forget Him was to rob themselves of the very things they needed for life. By observing the Sabbath, the Jews were proclaiming their identification with the Creator. God created in 6 days and rested on the 7th. Their honor to the Creator set them apart from other nations. They had tuned away from a belief in the Lord and were instead serving creation rather than the Creator. The purpose of the Sabbath day nationally set them apart from all the nations around them. They had a covenant with God that involved responsibilities not shared by other people. Every new generation needed to learn what it meant to be part of a people chosen by God to bring blessings to the entire world. I suggest that you, if you haven't already, always set aside a time to worship with God. I know you attend church on Sundays and Tuesdays, but that truly isn't enough. You need that extra time with God to give you that boost that's needed throughout the week. That extra time will help you with the rough days when things or life is just not going well. That extra time will shift you right back on track. That extra time will allow peaceful days and nights. That extra time with God will give you confidence, support, stability that's needed to survive in this evil world. Build a relationship with God. Seek Him daily. Make Him your BFF. I hope I have put something on your mind. Until next time, God bless.